Today I'm going to talk to you about some Scandinavian gypsies, and of course, I'm gonna drink 2 beers.
To Brew Tuesday, drink 2 beers, yeah! Drink 2 beers, it's 2 Brew Tuesday.
Hello my beer drinking friends, and welcome to another 2 Brew Tuesday. I'm your host Andy, and on today's episode I'm going to be talking about a couple of Scandinavian beers, and they both actually happen to also be brewed by gypsy brewers. So what do I mean by gypsy brewer? I think we've talked about this a couple of times before, especially when it came to Mikkeller, and we may even have had one of these brewers on before. But basically a gypsy brewer is someone that doesn't actually own a physical brewery. So what do? They go around the world or around the country, depending on what kind of gypsy brewer they are, and they find other breweries that are interested in working with them, partnering with them, and they do collaboration brews. So one of the advantages obviously is these breweries don't have to buy their own brew house, so they're saving a lot of money up front. And the breweries that they collaborate with have the opportunity to bring in some fresh, creative, new ideas. And people like collaboration beers, so these beers usually sell pretty well. So both of the breweries that we're talking about today, these beers were both made in Europe, in Scandinavia. The first one we're going to talk about is this guy right here. It's called Cacao. So this was actually, the gypsy brewer on this one is actually an American brewer. That's Stillwater Artisanal Ales. Stillwater was started by a guy named Brian, who was actually famous as a electronica DJ. But I think it was around 2010, he got heavily into the beer world, became a home brewer, and started doing all these collaborations around the world. So he's known for doing some wild and crazy ideas. This Cacao was done in Sweden, in the town in the area of Gothenburg. And the brewery's name, I'm going to horribly mispronounce it, but I'm going to call it Dujas. Sound right to you? Sounds right to me. I don't know. So yeah, this is Cacao. This is an Imperial chocolate stout brewed with cacao, coconut, and vanilla. I was reading up on this beer, and it said, they really wanted to make this taste like a chocolate candy bar. So I'm gonna crack this beer open, see what it tastes like. So there's a very small hiss. I know this beer's, I've had it for a while. I think it was brewed in 2015, if I'm not mistaken. So obviously it's inky black in color, not much clarity. There's a small little bit of head. Obviously it's a little bit older, so it's going to have a little less carbonation. No matter what you do, you're going to start to lose carbonation. But I do see some carbonation coming out of this guy. Also, it's an Imperial stout. I think this one is 11.5% ABV. Yep, 11.5% ABV. So that's also going to cut down on your head retention a bit. Wow. When I take the first aroma sniff of this beer, I'm getting a ton of that chocolate aroma. A little bit of vanilla, some sweetness, and just like a background note of a little bit of coconut. I think I should take a taste. Wow, that's really nice. I mean, this beer is all about the chocolate, so I mean, it's chocolate up front, it's chocolate in the middle, and it's chocolate at the very end when you finish it. It does have a little bit of sweetness. Obviously, the big alcohol in there is also going to sort of give you that sweet note. I think the vanilla is really more in the background. I think it's there to sort of reinforce your notion of what chocolate tastes like, because most of the time when you're buying a chocolate candy bar, it's got vanilla in it as well. And again, the coconut is there sort of in the background. It's definitely noticeable, but it's not like the overwhelming flavor. The roast on this beer is actually very mellow. Probably a little bit due because it's a few years old now. So some of those harsher, chocolate and maybe any like Carafa or any of those other really dark malts, the harshness is actually settled out, so it makes this a really smooth beer. I could see pairing this, you know, obviously with any kind of dessert. You know, it's got a little bit of sweetness. The chocolate obviously would go great with some, I would say some like berries, some vanilla ice cream. Let's see, what else can I tell you about the beer? I mean, I'm getting it. It's a pretty medium body for such a big, heavy beer. As far as alcohol goes, it actually is pretty mellow on the palate. It doesn't have that like thick, syrupy sweetness to it. So it does actually finish pretty good. As I've had a couple more sips, I'm also getting just a little bit of that alcohol warmth. And of course at 11.5%, I mean, obviously that's gonna happen. That's very enjoyable though. So I'm gonna move on to our second beer. Second beer comes from a brewery called, and I'm gonna horribly mispronounce this one too, TO Øl. So you might wanna just call it Tool, but it's actually TO Øl, and I believe ale is Danish for beer. So TO Øl was actually started, has its roots going all the way back to 2005. Two friends who were actually still in high school in Denmark ended up, you know, they were tired of, you know, hearing about all these 100-year-old breweries and all their magical history, but all they were turning out was just boring, plain lagers. So they decided to get together in their high school laboratory, started experimenting and actually making beer there. By 2010, they had actually released their first beer. And as I said, these guys are also gypsy brewers as well. This is their Pineapple Express, and this is the barrel-aged variant of the Pineapple Express. So I'm gonna crack it open. Nice little tiny hiss there. Again, this one is actually a few years old as well, I believe. It doesn't have a produced on date, but it says, you know, it's good until January 2025. So maybe I'm drinking this one too early. So this is also a stout. It's got pineapple in it, and this one was barrel aged in cognac and whiskey barrels. Wow. I mean, I haven't even put my nose in the glass yet, and I can already get a little bit of that pineapple aroma, so this is gonna be really interesting. Again, we've got a pretty dark color. This one has a little bit more of a brownish tinge to it. It's also got just a slightly higher head on it, but it's still pretty mellow. This one I think is 10.5%, so you know, it's almost like a session beer. There is a decent amount of carbonation though. I do see some good bubbles. And that little tiny lingering head on the edge, it does keep getting replenished. It's not going away. Wow, that's very interesting. So on the aroma, the first thing I actually get is some of those barrel notes. I'm getting that sort of oak, vanilla, tannin quality to the beer. I would say that follows up with a little bit more of that stout aroma that I'm expecting. It's a little bit roasty, and then it finally comes through with that pineapple fruitiness. Let's take a sip. Ooh, wow. All right, so on this beer, the overwhelming flavor characteristic is definitely the barrel character. I mean, it is a very sharp barrel character. It's a lot of wood, and it almost actually overcompensates for everything else. So, you know, the roasty, you know, chocolatey stout flavors, they're very much in the background, and it just has that sort of finishing sweetness of the pineapple. It's actually got a very light body. I would say this beer finished pretty low. It's very dry. So there's not a lot of sweetness, and a lot of the bitterness I'm actually feeling. It's, you know, it's not coming from the hops. It's actually that wood character is just like, it really wants to like punch you in the face with all that wood. This beer, I would see, it's not really a dessert beer like the other beer. I would pair it with something, you know, really meaty or gamey, you know, some venison, or, you know, a nice thick juicy steak. That's really amazing. Well, those are our 2 beers for 2 Brew Tuesday. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. We've got a ton of other content, so I would suggest, give us a thumbs up on this one and then go ahead and click that subscribe button. That way you won't miss out on any of our other content. Right now we're starting to look at beer festivals and what we might hit for the spring and summer here in Southern California. And I wouldn't want you guys to miss out. You can also find us on Facebook and on Instagram where we post a lot of content. And yeah, until next Tuesday, everyone. Cheers.